talk about how negative perceptions of career and technical education may impact students' paths to success. But first, let's go back a little further, almost 50 years ago. The story begins in 1976, when I was proudly graduating from preschool at the VOTEC, or Vocational Technical School, where both my parents worked. My father was a cosmetology teacher, and my mother was a secretary in adult education. Over the years, I continued to visit VOTEC and get my hair done in my dad's class, or the art teacher would critique the cartoons I created in elementary school, and on occasion, my mother would bring home delicious snacks from the culinary arts class. As a child, VOTEC represented a wonderful world of creativity to me. Fast forward to my freshman year of high school, when I discovered that others were not as enthusiastic about VOTEC as I was. Students who went to VOTEC were seen by some of my peers as not capable of handling college prep courses, or they were seen to be trouble kids or had behavioral problems. I wondered why the perceptions of VOTEC were so negative, coming from people who hadn't experienced it firsthand like I had. Now, it's been decades since high school, but in my current role as a consultant working with K-12 and higher education, I continue to hear stigma around career and technical education. Stigma in educational settings is not new, whether it's a stereotype or bias about students needing academic support, or staff needing mental health resources, or families without a formal education. I heard negative biases about all these topics pop up in discussions over the years. And the stigma around career and technical education persists even after so many years of promoting its value, need, and benefit to society. And unfortunately, I believe that this stigma often prevents people from taking advantage of innovative programs that can lead to successful, stable careers. So why does there continue to be a stigma around these opportunities that could benefit people who prefer hands-on learning experiences and work environments? What can be done to reduce the stigma? That is what we're focused on here today. Career and technical education, or CTE, is sometimes referred to as VOTEC, or vocational education, or sometimes referred to as programs in the trades. But for our time today, we'll define CTE as applied learning programs that provide knowledge and skills to prepare students for further education or careers in current or emerging professions. So you might hear it referred to as CTE at the middle and high school levels, but these programs can exist in colleges and in adult education programs outside of a degree-granting institution. Speaking of degrees, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2022 found that more than 2/3 of jobs are in occupations that don't typically require a college degree. And more recently, in January 2024, a major recruiting site found that 52% of job postings didn't have a formal education requirement. Instead, companies were looking at skill sets more than college degrees. For those who are pursuing a college diploma, it can get quite costly. For a 4-year public institution, the average cost of attendance is $26,000 per year for students living on campus. And for a 4-year private institution, the cost is more than double that, and then some. And we've also seen a lot of articles and memes recently about the national student loan debt crisis.
Oh, wow.
So with a clear goal for CTE and with 4-year degrees being quite costly or not even required in some fields, and why isn't CTE the first choice for the majority of students? Well, I found in my decades of work in education that the stigma around CTE often prevents more students from taking advantage of these programs. Social psychologist Irving Goffman called stigma an undesired differentness. Let's explore how this undesired differentness connects to CTE. In a 2020 study of community college career and technical education, they connected the idea of CTE stigma to perceptions that it was for less able students, it was less rigorous, or it was for those who didn't appreciate the civic purpose of higher education. A key finding of the study was that parents facilitate stigma. That is, they saw it or recommended it as a last resort, and they also didn't see its value in terms of high wage potential. In 2022, a study with junior high school students looked at their perceptions of CTE and how it relates to their interest in taking vocational programs in high school. They connected CTE stigma to 3 dimensions. 1, labeling, that's their own negative perceptions of students in the programs. 2, social isolation, not wanting to be seen with students in the programs. And 3, devaluation and discrimination, that is other people's negative perceptions of the programs. While they found many connections between stigma and interest in attending vocational education in high school, the strongest results indicated that the more devaluation and discrimination reported, the less likely the students would choose to attend vocational programs in high school. So once again, other people's perceptions were influencing students the most. In my work in education, I've heard from dozens of school staff and parents about the need for technical skills. And they continue to report stigma. Often school staff will point to the parents as the source of the stigma, and the parents will point to the school staff. I recently spoke with leaders from the CTE school that see exponential growth. They have waiting lists for many of their programs. So I asked if that meant the stigma was gone. They indicated that while there is increased interest and enrollment in their programs, the stigma continues to persist, but specifically for families who've been in the community for a long time. That is, even with the many iterations of CTE, they continue to view it as the programs in schools that were in existence when they were in school 10, 20, or 30 years ago. So a common thread across all of the research is that CTE stigma starts early and is influenced by perceptions of others, often family members. So what can we do about it? We'll never completely remove stigma, but how can we think differently about career and technical education so that more people can take advantage of programs that can provide such a benefit? How about I tell you a story? There's a reason why the same stories are retold and resonate with generation after generation. It's because they're presented in a fresh, exciting, and relatable way. How can we use elements of a story to change outdated or negative perceptions of CTE? First, let's start with characters. Can the reader or listener see themselves reflected in the characters of the story? In outreach to influencers or decision makers, who is telling the CTE story? Is it someone who represents the system that parents didn't connect with when they were in school? Is it a community leader, a business owner, that doesn't look like the community here in the story? Ensuring that the communication is coming from someone similar to the listener is an important way to connect an old story with a new audience. When our attitudes, our opinions are different from someone we look up to or care about, like our friends, we will likely change our opinions, or we might need to change our friends. We like balance, and balance theory is one way we can try to change perceptions. Who is the natural opinion leader for the group whose opinions you'd like to change? If that person can be positioned as the CTE champion and let others know their positive perceptions, then we have an influencer influencing the influencers. When the plot only seems to have 1 or 2 possible outcomes, interest in the story might be limited. But when there are seemingly endless possibilities, it's exciting. We want to know more. We want to be in on the adventure. CTE versus college is often presented as a fork in the educational road. But as the late UConn psychology professor and my mentor, Dr. Skip Lowe, used to say, it's not either or, but both and more. Taking a look at this career tree poster that was in a CTE center I visited, you can see there are so many possibilities and so many options for someone interested in the field. CTE can lead to entry-level positions, college or graduate school, or upskilling at any time. So it's not a fork in the road, but rather it's branches on a tree in the forest of possibility. Now imagine you're interested in agriculture. You could start out as a horticulture apprentice, or with more education and experience, maybe own your own landscaping company. And at the professional level, one might decide to be an environmental engineer. CTE provides a foundation for reveal the end of the story and highlight CTE graduate success. First, let's start with sharing the anticipation of future success through public signing days. Did you know that National Signing Day, the day when students sign letters of intent to enter technical fields, is April 18th, 2024? What kind of media coverage do you think we'll see? We should also see CTE alumni highlights on social media platforms that influencers consume. And displays in primary and elementary schools of CTE student accomplishments, particularly during open houses and conference days when there's increased attendance and enthusiasm for school. After the story, people leave reviews, and people read reviews too. Would families, current and former students, staff, and businesses recommend CTE programs to friends, family members, or colleagues? Asking a Net Promoter Score question like this one can get some quick insights as to what stakeholder groups are thinking. If some groups are more favorable than others, why is that happening? Would those who have the most influence on prospective students recommend CTE programs even if they didn't attend them themselves? Do they see the value of CTE and are willing to let others know? For many, the learning adventure includes skills training that prepares them for a future career or for job advancement. CTE plays a role all along the path to financial freedom and professional growth. It's not a fairy tale. It's wonderfully real. So it's time to think differently about career technical education. By telling an updated story about CTE that is fresh, exciting, and relatable to those who are influencing decisions to participate, we can ensure that students today are well prepared for the careers of tomorrow, pursuing innovative pathways that can help them live happily